And a good Tuesday evening to you. Meteorologist Dan Skeldon here on the 7th evening of February, talking weather, tidal flooding, on Tidal Flooding Talk, brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition. Every Tuesday evening, right around 7:30 or so, Palma and I will chat a little bit about what type of weather we have coming up. We'll discuss if we have any concerns going forward. And let me see if I can rotate my phone here like this. And we will talk about where we are winter-wise. And, you know, we haven't had much of a winter this year, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon going forward over the next week or two. If you're a snow lover, it has not been your year. On the other hand, though, we haven't had too many impactful coastal storms either, so that's not necessarily a bad thing. And we have been getting, you know, some rain. Of course, we ended last year with a pretty good drought in late summer and early fall, and you know that has since been erased as well. So, brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition. We're going to bring in our co-host Palma Shiles. A little tidal flooding talk on this Tuesday evening. What we'll do is we'll discuss where we are weather-wise going forward for the next week or so. That'll take us to Valentine's Day. And quite frankly, there's really not a lot to discuss there. And then a little bit about, you know, some flooding 101, if you will, and a little refresher as far as, you know, watches and warnings and advisories and differences in what you need to know. But we'll start with our current weather pattern. And that is a mild one, as much of the winter has been. Of course, it did get really cold this past Friday and Saturday, but as promised, that cold was pretty short-lived. It wasn't as intense as our Christmas cold blast was. Christmas cold lasted 4 days. This most recent cold came in last Friday, February 4th, 3rd, and then exited Saturday, February 4th. No more Arctic blasts in sight. We are pretty quiet in the cold air respect. Highs are generally in the 50s for much of the next 7 to 10 days. And obviously in the 50s, you are not going to get any appreciable snow. So if you are a snow lover, we are looking at pretty minimal, not zero snow chances, but minimal snow chances going forward. There's a small chance over the weekend we can discuss. Just had a full moon as well. The moon was full. Ironically, the February snow moon this past Sunday. Not going to bring any snow with it. And thankfully, no tidal flooding to coincide with the full moon either. So going forward, we have a shower or two tonight. We have a little bit of light rain on Thursday. And there is a little coastal low that may develop down off the Carolinas this weekend. But for it to bring any, you know, significant weather, it has to thread the needle, and it could very well just end up going out to sea. So we'll keep an eye on that chance. The lack of cold would probably imply that would be rain if it were to come this weekend too. We have Super Bowl Sunday as well. I know I am not an Eagles fan, but I know being an Eagles country, there are a lot of Eagles fans. Of course, Arizona, it's a roof control setting. If the weather's nice, they'll have the roof open. So the weather not going to play an impact in the game, and it's pretty warm out there anyway. Generally in the 70s running up to the Super Bowl and 60s for the Super Bowl. So, you know, no impacts weather-wise on the game. And if you have Super Bowl parties locally, it looks cool and breezy this weekend, generally in the 40s. But for now, it looks mostly dry. We'll keep an eye on that coastal low, but I'm not really seeing much in the way of chances for that to be anything significant weather-wise. So where we are is it is mild this week, slightly cooler this upcoming weekend, and then even milder next week with highs well into the 50s through Valentine's Day, which is 1 week from tonight, and then beyond Valentine's Day as well. So it's basically more of the same. We'll see where this winter is going to rank overall, but it's going to be, you know, in the top 10 or 20 warmest ever, with more warm weather coming for the next week or two. Don't know if that means we're doomed in March and have a real cold and snowy March. We will see, but nothing to indicate that at this point. Rain chances is pretty small tonight, some light rain Thursday, and then we'll have that coastal system we'll have to watch. All right, took a few tries, but got my co-host Palma Shiles on. Palma, welcome. First Tidal Flooding Talk of February. So welcome to what is traditionally the snowiest month of the winter, but so far not living up to that.
Hi, Dan, and hi, everyone watching. Yeah, I was having some technical difficulties there, but I'm here now.
Yeah, we're just chatting about the lack of cold and snow this winter, which is a good or bad thing depending on your point of view. But we've also had a lack of coastal storms. That's generally a good thing, right? Because you don't want the wind and the flooding and the problems that those coastal storms cause. We've seen many a winter with repetitive storms, repetitive rounds of flooding, beach erosion, all sorts of problems, dunes being washed away. We're not having that this winter. So the lack of cold and snow has led to a lack of storms, and the two go hand in hand, but the lack of storms is not necessarily a bad thing.
So for the foreseeable future, you think we're still mild for the next, how long?
Definitely mild, foreseeable future, probably through at least next Friday. So it's at least the next 10 days we are mild. Most days are in the 50s. They should not be in the 50s in February, so it's consistently mild. The weekend might be a little cooler. Now, there is a threat of a Saturday, Sunday storm down off the Carolinas. Will that become a nor'easter? I mean, I think it could become a coastal storm, but likely it goes out to sea. I don't want to say it's definitely going to go out to sea, even if it were to come up the coast. Is it going to be anything significant? Probably not, but we will watch this weekend just in case. It is the Super Bowl. People probably going to be heading out for parties. And are you rooting for the Eagles, Palma? Are you an Eagles fan?
I am.
You are. All right. So, big game. Should be a great Super Bowl. We'll see if the weather is just cool, breezy, and dry, if the storm goes out to sea, or if we're on the edge of it, or if it comes further up the coast. So a little bit of uncertainty for the weekend, but with a lack of cold air, you've got to think it'd probably be rain. And the snow chances are 0. Just had a full moon this past Sunday, no flooding, so that's good. So even if a storm were to hit next weekend, we'd be past the full moon, so the tides would be lower. So it is a rare winter where we haven't really had many nor'easters to track, and therefore not much in the way of tidal flooding and snow and cold.
Well, we are Tidal Flooding Talk, so even though there are no flood forecasts for us for now, let's talk some flooding, such as, I know you wanted to talk about the types of flooding and the severity, how we measure the severity of flooding.
Yeah, we always throw out those terms. I mean, you're an Atlantic City resident too, and hopefully residents and those that deal with flooding, know the difference between minor, moderate, major. Obviously, that major is worse than moderate. Moderate's worse than minor. Minor is going to be the least serious. Obviously, that's just a definition of the words. But hopefully, the longer you live in a place, the more you associate, moderate. That means the water is going to come up to here and these streets are going to flood. Oh, moderate, that means the Black Horse Pike's going to close and I'll have to take a different way to work. Oh, minor, that just means some nuisance flooding. So hopefully, that's our goal too, or this should be the goal of any coastal resident, is to know what those definitions mean, minor, moderate, major. We could throw a number at you, like 7.2 feet above mean low water, but that generally doesn't translate to, I know what that is. But if you put minor, moderate, major, record on flooding, you kind of know. So, it starts with nuisance. And nuisance is just the real flood-prone spots always flood. I used to live in Ocean City, and I knew that was like 25th and 25th and Haven always would flood. And residents there knew that too. That's one of the more susceptible places on the island. And nuisance is stuff that happens many, many times a year. It's nuisance; it doesn't really bother you. Then you go to
nuisance
minor.
Is the mild, or is nuisance before you hit mild flood?
Yeah, nuisance is the first thing. It doesn't even qualify as minor. Back in the day, nuisance was actually the same thing as minor, but because nuisance happens so often, because tidal flooding is happening more often, we just kind of put it in its own category. So it's, nuisance are the streets that always flood just a little bit. Water comes up. I mean, it's not that the streets are impassable, but those storm drains that always flood and come up, they will come up in nuisance. There'll be no advisories, there'll be no warnings. You're not going to get alerts for nuisance because they can happen 50, 100 times a year, in a bad year. So it's just a nuisance stuff. You'll hardly notice it unless you have one of those drains in front of your house that is a nuisance drain and, will flood. Minor is when you start to notice it. That's when, some streets get flooded. Usually streets are not impassable in minor tidal flooding, but it's more noticeable. And when we have minor tidal flooding, that's when the National Weather Service will put out a coastal flood advisory. That's when you'll get an alert on your phone, or if you have signed up for it, you'll get an advisory. And it will just mean, hey, be advised, there'll be some minor flooding. You may have to take a different street, but road closures are not expected and no major impacts are expected.
So it's more of just an inconvenience.
It is, a slight inconvenience. It's a step up from nuisance. You're going to notice it more. You may not even notice nuisance unless you're in a flood-prone area. Minor, you'll probably notice, but it's more of an inconvenience. It doesn't have a major impact, yet you should be aware of it, that, okay, some minor tidal flooding will be ongoing. It's the next couple of levels, the moderate and the major, where things worsen pretty significantly.
Now, what type was it right before Christmas? Was that just moderate, or did that reach major?
That was high-end moderate. It was, bordering on major. So, and it also depends. It can vary island to island. Sandy was a lot worse in Monmouth and Ocean counties. It was pretty bad in Atlantic County. It wasn't quite as bad Cape May County. So it's not going to be universal every single island, because every island gets different winds, and winds do different things, and the winds will be different strengths and directions. So, it's not going to be universal up and down the Jersey Shore. But moderate is when you get a coastal flood warning. So obviously warning sounds more serious than advisory. It is. And moderate is when the Black Horse Pike can close, the White Horse Pike can close, Route 47 going into Wildwood can close, Route 60, the bridge 72 into LBI, can close. So that's when you start to have road closures that are more noticeable and more impactful. Is when you have moderate tidal flooding, and that's when your life may be a little more disruptive.
And how long have we been using flood advisories and flood warnings?
They've been around for quite a while. Like, the threshold has changed. To get back to those numbers, in Atlantic County, for instance, I think like the trigger for our advisory used to be like 5.7. But because 5.7 was happening so often because our sea level's rising and flooding's happening, we had to raise the threshold to 6. So now if it's 5.7, you don't get an advisory anymore. So the advisories and warnings have been around for a long time, but the thresholds sometimes change based on how often things happen. We don't want, if the nuisance flooding is occurring 100 times a year, we don't want to issue 100 coastal flood advisories a year, because people will just become deaf to it. They'll become immune to it. Oh, another advisory, another advisory. It'd be a daily fixture on your phone. So we want that threshold to be somewhere where you'll notice it. It's going to have an impact, but you're not going to think it's a useless product because it happens all the time. So.
Now, is moderate flooding happening more often now, or do we mostly just see nuisance and minor?
I think all of them are more likely to happen. Obviously this winter makes a liar out of that statement, right? Because it's not happening nearly as often. But I think as sea levels rise a little bit, as we continue to develop the shore, tidal flooding is happening more often. Now, communities are fighting it better. They're installing more and more pumping stations. They're improving drains. So that's going to try to lessen the number of times, or if it is happening, it's going to lessen the severity of it. So the infrastructure, the defenses we put up will try to combat it. But in reality, as we go forward, like if you look at it every decade, tidal flooding will become more and more frequent, and moderate and even major will become more and more frequent. But it's also important to know that it's not going to be 100 times a year for moderate flooding. It's going to be, if you average 2 or 3, maybe you'll average 3 or 4. major if it once every 2 years, maybe it'll be once every year. I'm just throwing out those numbers. So it will be more frequent, but it's not like moderate and major is going to become an everyday occurrence. It's just they become a little more likely each season.
Well, I like to think that we are becoming more prepared for flooding anyway. I mean, since Sandy, a lot of regulations have changed. The coalition was formed. So, and I think people are just more aware of the dangers of flooding.
I think they are. I think, the warning is out there. The forecasts are better. I mean, people get alerts on their phone. They know which streets flood. We've had some bad storms over the past decade where people are better connecting the dots. Oh, minor means this, moderate means this, major means this. If it is major, I'm definitely moving my car. If it's minor, I'll just change my way to work. People are becoming more knowledgeable to what each means. The forecasts are becoming better, and our defenses are becoming better as well. But it's going to continue to happen. And even though this winter kind of lets us let our guard down a little bit, March could bring a major tidal flooding episode. The summer could bring up a hurricane that brings a major tidal flooding episode. So we've talked about it many tidal flooding talks. It is a year-round concern. And we can have 5 very quiet years in a row, but that does not mean that the threat is less. It just means we're very, very lucky. We could have 5 very bad years in a row. There's no rhyme or reason as to what's going to be a good year and what's going to be a bad year. It's just we take it 1 year and one forecast and 1 7-day at a time.
Right. If you're just tuning in, this is Tidal Flooding Talk. If you're watching live, you can ask questions or leave comments here on Facebook. A couple comments here, none really related to flooding, but Don Mason says, "Hi Dan, who do you like in the Super Bowl?" So even though you're not necessarily an Eagles fan,
I do think the Eagles are going to win. I don't like saying that, but I do think the Eagles are going to win. I have a lot of respect for the team, so I do think they are the better team. So I do like the Eagles winning 37-31. That's my forecast for the game.
Okay.
How about you?
And well, I'm not going to guess the score. I haven't thought about it, but I do hope the Eagles win. I think they're going to win. So.
Okay.
But so no travel restraints for the Eagles game?
Not as of right now, unless that coastal low is more mischievous and comes up the coast. And even then, it'd probably just be some rain. I don't see any major, weekend systems to throw a wrench into Super Bowl plays. I want to say the last time the Eagles were in a Super Bowl, they played my Patriots. And you guys beat my Patriots. So that one I didn't like too much, but it was a good game, and no hard feelings whatsoever. But I think we had some winter weather around that weekend, if my memory serves me correctly. I don't think there'll be any winter weather around. We got a 10-day forecast that has 7, 8, or 9 days in the 50s. Not the 30s, or not even the 40s. So it's a pretty warm forecast for this time of year. So snow chances pretty minimal. Coastal storm chances are going to stay high through March. I think eventually we're going to pop 1 or 2, but we'll see. We'll just take it one tidal flooding talk at a time. Now next Tuesday is Valentine's Day, so we're going to be on earlier at 6:30 to accommodate a few plans that we have. So 6:30. Next Tuesday evening, Valentine's Day. Looks pretty warm in the 50s right now. And we will have an early tidal flooding talk that day.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. We're again brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition. Thanks so much. Good luck to your Eagles. I'm not going to say go Eagles, but I will say good luck to your Eagles, and we'll see how close.
That's fair. I'll accept that.
All right. Have a good night.
All right. Good night.